Okay, shall we begin with a word of prayer? Amen. Okay, what we're going to do is we're now going to talk about Daniel 11:40, and this is like a follow-on from our last series that we were doing on the head of gold. Now, there's many things in these presentations that we've just done that we really need to learn more about, and I'm sure as we go forward the Lord will unfold things to us. And what we're going to do now is, again, we're going to look at Daniel 11:40, but we're just going to put some principles in place. I don't profess to understand these verses in their fullest import, but I do believe that we are to understand a certain amount of light in regards to these truths, to the last 6 verses, and Daniel 11 itself. There is much that we can glean before midnight, although I do believe that right here at midnight we're going to get such an unveiling of His glory that is going to humble us in the dust. But nonetheless, we're sanctified through the truth, and it's a message of truth that comes to the little praying company right in here. So if we want to be part of that little praying company, we need to be praying for the light, and as it comes to us we need to be ready to accept it. Otherwise then, we are just not following after the Lord's will. So we're going to begin with a principle that we all know, but these principles are very important because these determine who God is. And if we go to 1 Corinthians 15:46, it's a principle we all know very well, but like I said, it's very important. It says, "Howbeit that was not first which is spiritual, but that which is natural, and afterward that which is spiritual." So we understand that the Bible is a revelation of historical truth, and that historical truth is designed to teach us things that are all pointing to the end of the world, which is the effect of every vision. We are to rightly divide those things and bring them down to our time period where we understand that all the prophets are teaching the same truth. They're all speaking about this great crisis, this big event that's about to take place right before our eyes. So, in order to understand the spiritual, as in the perfect fulfillment of what's about to take place, we need to first understand the natural. So, hence the foundational truths of this message is to do with the last 6 verses of Daniel 11:40 to 45. Now, part of the problem at the end of the world with God's people, it says that they will tear down that which they have once built up, right? So we have to be careful that we are not removing any of the old landmarks, that we are standing on the foundations, and that we're upholding the last 6 verses of Daniel 11:40 to 45 that were given to us at the beginning, right? So this is very important, and it's upon all these principles that we build the truth. The new light is not independent of the old, but an unfolding of it. And if you don't have the new, it's because you didn't really possess the old. This is these principles that are taught to us. So let's go and remind ourselves about the old. So let's go to Daniel 11 and verse 40. And we're just going to break it down into its 2 parts, part A and part B, which we have come to understand, represent 1798 and 1989 respectively. So Daniel 11:40 says, and at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. So when we look at the natural is when the prophecy is first fulfilled. Who does the prophecy relate to? Right? That is the natural. That is the local fulfillment of that prophecy. But then once it's been locally and naturally fulfilled, it now points to a worldwide application, a spiritual fulfillment, right? Which will be literally fulfilled when it comes to pass, right? So we understand that in this verse, it's referring to the king of the south being atheistic France, which was a two-horned power based upon Egypt and Sodom, these two principles of this nation at that time, that warred against the Pope and inflicted a deadly wound, right? So we understand this principle, and the Pope at that time was the King of the North. So here we have 1798 teaching us about the principles, what's going to happen here, because 1798 and 1989 are pointed to midnight, their perfect fulfillment. So whatever is going to take place here has to be based upon 1798, because this is the long drawn out war between the King of the North and the King of the South. And when we come to 1989, we can take this first couple of words from Daniel 11:40, where it says, and at the time of the end, right? Because in verse 40 it says, at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. There's a colon there. And it's now going to explain the first part. So when you get to the second half, it says, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. We can take the term or the phrase at the time of the end and stick it right in front of it, because these are the two times of the end, 1798 and 1989. So let's read Daniel 11:40, second part. And at the time of the end, the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. So we understood that this is where the papacy that received a deadly wound in 1798, retaliates against the King of the South. But we know that it was through an alliance with the United States that became the armies of the King of the North, provided the Pope with the military and economic might to overthrow the King of the South, which in 1989 was the USSR, which was a union of many countries, because it says many countries, and he shall enter into the countries and overflow and pass over, right? So it's a conglomerate of countries that is conquered right here, and it was represented by the United Soviet Socialist Republic. So when we see all those things, then that is what must be represented at the end of the world when we come to the spiritual fulfillment. So let's just make some notes here, right? So we have atheistic France. This is the king of the south. And the king of the north, when you bring both of them together, let's just deal with 1798. The king of the north is the papacy. This is a two horns, and king of the north, papacy, deadly wound. Just write that here. And then in 1989, you have the king of the South is the USSR, right? It's a conglomerate of countries. And the king of the North is the papacy and the USA military and economic power. So when you come down to midnight, right here, you have to bring all these different traits together. Now we know from studies for several years now, we have put in place that pagan Rome typifies the United States at the end of the world. France represented pagan Rome as the country that puts the papacy on the throne, is the country that's going to take the papacy off the throne, typifying the work of the United States of America. The United States is the country that's going to put the Pope on the throne. It's also the country that's going to be in charge of taking the papacy off the throne, represented by those 10 kings. Going to eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So we know that France typifies the United States. We know just prior to this time here that there was a revolution in France, and it's typifying a civil war in the United States at the end of the world. Therefore, the king of the South, France, which is a two-horned power, is typifying the USA. So
many countries.
Yeah, we also have the king of the South here. This was also an atheistic country, and the USSR was a conglomerate of countries. Is the USA a conglomerate of countries? Yes, it's made up of many states, which are bigger than a lot of people's countries that they actually live in. So the USA fits the same sort of setup as was the USSR, and we know that the USA that typified France was the country that rose up in Revelation 11 to fight against God's word, right? And it was represented by atheism. And this is going to be fulfilled by the USA under the auspices of the King of the South. So, however, the King of the North, the papacy receives a deadly wound, but when you come down to, in 1798, but when you come down to 1989, you have the King of the North, the papacy and the USA with a military and economic power. So you bring those two things together, you have the USA as the King of the North plus the papacy. Now, that might seem confusing, but this is what it's teaching, and we're hopefully going to show this, that actually what's happening in Daniel 11:40 is an internal war in the United States. And these are two different ideologies that are seeking for the mastery within the United States at the end of the world. And we know that this is the one that's going to win, right? So let's try to show that and prove that. So let's give some proof now. Now, yesterday we were talking about this number 21 right here, and if we go to let me see what this quote is. It's taken from Great Controversy, page 230. It says, "The gospel of peace, which France had rejected, was to be only too surely rooted out and terrible would be the results. On the 21st of January 1793, 258 years from the very day that fully committed France to the persecution of the reformers, another procession with a far different purpose passed through the streets of Paris. Again the king was the chief figure. Again there were tumult and shouting. Again there were heard the cry for more victims. Again there were black scaffolds, and the scenes of the day were closed by horrid executions. Louis, right, which is another name for Clovis, it says, Louis, struggling hand to hand with his jailers and executioners, was dragged forward to the block, and there held down by main force till the axe had fallen, and his dissevered head rolled on the scaffold. Now, all history is placed there for a purpose. We know that this story right here is talking about the head of gold. We also know that the weapon that's going to be used to bring down Babylon right here is an axe. And it tells us as we went through this, in I believe it's in Jeremiah 51.
Thou art my battle axe.
Yeah, thou art my battle axe, right? And the battle axe is going to bring him down is God's people proclaiming a message, and it's Islam that's the weapon that's going to use to chop down the tree, right? They're going to be overthrown right here. And it's typifying here Louis, who's also Clovis, who typifies the United States at the end of the world, getting his head chopped off, right? I think it's something symbolic. And it's also marking right here this this French Revolution. And in this very quote, 258 years earlier, to the very day, so it was 1535, 21st of, was it January? Just 21st of January 1535, there was a decree made to destroy Protestantism. This is the taking away of the daily right here, the removal of this this thing that hinders the Pope from coming to the fore, because the Constitution of the United States of America is what separated church and state, and it has to be destroyed. So whatever this decree is doing right here, it's removing the Constitution, and therefore it's removing Protestantism. So you have these two dates, 21st of January 1793 and 21st of January 1535, marking two events that parallel each other right here. And you'll see the reason why I put that in place in a minute. The second one is something that we read on our last presentation. So I'm talking about the 21st of February 1848, and we'll just read this again from J.N. Loughborough, Great Second Advent Movement, page 271 and 272. On the 21st day of February 1848, when the courtiers of Louis, so there's no accident again, it's Louis, which is Clovis. God brings all these things together. When the courtiers of Louis Philippe of France were gathered around him, he said, I was never more firmly seated on the throne of empire than I am tonight. In the twilight of the next evening, wearing a pea jacket disguised as a hackney coachman, he fled outside the walls of the city of Paris, seeking a refuge for his personal safety. The cause of this great and sudden change is said to have been the result of some movement on his part favouring the papal usurpation which offended his subjects and soldiers. So here you have Louis represents the King of France, therefore it would represent the President of the United States of America, favouring this papal usurpation. It's an alliance there between the President, who is the King of the United States of America, with the Pope. Now we know since 1989 there's been this marriage, and this marriage is typifying this marriage that takes place right here. This is when Christ is talking to the Samaritan woman. He says, you've had 5 husbands, even this one who you now have is not your husband. So the alliance that took place here is only typifying the alliance that's going to take place there. And therefore this is the King of the North. This alliance that took place here was the King of the North. The alliance that takes place here is typifying it. You see the United States main alliance with the Pope, and it's usurping the constitution, and the people are not happy and they rise up against it, right? So France is the king of the south, and it rises up against the Pope, the king of the north, who's in a league with the king of was in a league with the king of the United States of America, which is also the king of the north, right? So you see that these two ideologies there, and it'll become clearer as we look at this. Because okay, the question I would ask then is, why does this happen? Why does the south rise up against the north? Well, let's look. Matthew chapter 24, in verses 6 to 8. And this is where they were asking Christ for a sign, and he was telling them the events that are about to unfold at midnight. In verse 6 it says, "And ye shall hear of wars and rumours of wars. See that ye be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet." So the wars and rumours of wars must come to pass right here, but the end, meaning the return of Christ, is not yet. We know that in our time, the return of Christ is here at point B, not at point A. Point A is where he comes as the Lamb. Point B is where he comes as a conqueror to deliver his people. So we must understand that. "For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of birth pangs," the beginning of sorrows. This is the beginning of the birth pangs right here, where Babylon is going to be born and where Jerusalem is going to be born. These two opposing forces. And if we go to Isaiah 19, verses 1 to 4, we've spoken about these verses. It says, "The burden of Egypt, behold, the Lord rideth upon a swift cloud, and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one his brother, and every one against his neighbour, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. And the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof, and they shall seek to the idols, and to the charmers, and to them that have familiar spirits, and to the wizards. And the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them, saith the Lord of hosts." So when you understand these verses, Isaiah 19 verse 1, the Lord's coming on this cloud. This is referencing Revelation 14 and verse 14. There are two harvests right here. There's the harvest of the wicked followed by the harvest of the righteous. And when you compare these verses, Christ sitting on this cloud, it's also Ezekiel chapter 1, it's Revelation chapter 10. But you can compare this, because in Ezekiel chapter 1 he's a whirlwind, and you can also show that he's represented as a lion. If you compare it with Jeremiah chapter 4, the lion comes out of his thicket like a whirlwind. This is representing the work of the king of the north. And when we were reading about this flying roll that comes down here, it's talking about the rise and fall of kingdoms, and Christ says that all the kingdoms are raised up to do his bidding, and he's going to overrule all for his purposes. So when you see Christ working here, Christ is the true king of the north, and he's the one, when he's doing this work, he's bringing forth the king of the north, right? It's going to be his instrument. It's the Assyrian, it's the rod of his anger. So he brings forth the king of the north, and he does that in the sense of this decree that he makes. And when he makes this decree, it causes the south to get agitated. And this is what's been represented here. He comes on the cloud and he sets the Egyptian against the Egyptian. He causes the king of the south to rise up against this decree that's put in place right here, because they're not happy with what's taken place between the President of the United States and this Pope. Now you can already see that. You can already see little murmurs of that. He just put this decree in place there to have a travel ban on certain Muslim countries, and many people rose up in opposition, and he's just like, I will do what I want, right? You know, he's like, this judge overruled it, and he's like totally, it's like inconsequential to him. He says, no, I will have my way. And this is what you're going to see here. Even though these people rise up against him, God is overruling it for his purpose. And it says in verse 4, and the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel lord. This is Nebuchadnezzar, the cruel and proud oppressor. And it's a principle, right, that Cestius hastes away, right? He comes here to put the decree in place, but it doesn't come to pass. It doesn't come to pass for several reasons. And one of them is because the south rises up, right, and inflicts a deadly wound. This is what France did. We put this in place in the last presentation. The deadly wound is inflicted right here. So, but it's only going to be for a period of time, right? Where we know that the Pope is going to get lifted back up right here when that deadly wound is healed. And in the meantime, because this doesn't come to pass, Trump, right, he's determined he's going to have his own way, right? And he's going to come and conquer. This is what we're going to see when the King of the North retaliates, because the King of the North is the Pope in the USA. And we already were talking last night how Herodias and Jezebel, they're behind the scenes pulling the strings. So Trump will be determined to have his own way, and the Pope will be backing him right behind the scenes. Spalding McGann 1.4 says that the two-horned beast has the lion's mouth, and it's the
power was in its head.
The power was in its head, right? And out of its mouth comes the decree, right? So it's the United States that's doing it, and right here they're trying to lift up the Pope, but the people are not happy because it's to do with to do that they have to remove the Constitution, right? It's a usurpation of the American Constitution. So, and it says here in verse 3 that they turn to they seek to the idols, to the charmers, and to them that are familiar spirits, and to the wizards. You got these four magicians and astrologers that you see in other stories. So it's a parallel story right here. So the cause, as we are saying, is this decree. Now we're going to bring in another quote from. It's from A.T. Jones, and it's August the 14th, 1889, AMS, page 229. And this is talking about the Blair Bill. And the Blair Bill was instituted on May 21st, 1888. And in 1888, I don't want to be presumptuous, but most people in this movement understand 1888 was a parallel to 9/11. It's a parallel to midnight. Okay, where the angel of 18, Revelation 18, comes down. This would be the angel that comes down here with the writing in his hand, this flying roll. Okay, and it says, when we read this, it says, there is, however, an already large and constantly increasing element demanding that the Constitution shall be so amended as to empower Congress to legislate in behalf of Christianity. And a great many are even calling for religious legislation without any such amendment. May the 21st, 1888, Senator Blair of New Hampshire introduced a bill to promote the observance of the Lord's Day as a day of religious worship and to secure the religious observance of the Sabbath day. So we see how this number 21 is bringing these things and plugging them in right here. It's an overthrow of the Constitution. They have to overthrow the Constitution to put these things in place. And again, when we look at Trump, the Lord has already shown us these things. And we can see this already with the Johnson Amendment. And for those of you that don't know what the Johnson Amendment is, I'm going to read it. This is taken from Wikipedia. And this has just been recently added because this was one of the pleas that was made by Trump during his presidential campaign, that he said that he would remove the Johnson Amendment. And this was showing that he was looking to please, because he's a populist, the evangelicals, the Christian right-wing movement out there, because it was going to benefit them, right? Now, the Johnson Amendment was put in place by Lyndon B. Johnson to protect basically the breaking of the tax laws. Religious institutions have a 501c3 and they are tax exempt. So basically, let's read through it. It'll probably explain itself, and I need to explain it more. It says, the Johnson Amendment is a provision in the US tax code that prohibits all 501c3 non-profit organizations from endorsing or opposing political candidates. 501c3 organizations are the most common type of non-profit organization in the United States, ranging from charitable foundations to universities and churches. The amendment is named for then Senator Lyndon B. Johnson of Texas. In recent years, many Republicans, including President Donald Trump, have sought to repeal it, arguing that it restricts the free speech rights of churches and other religious groups. Repeal has been criticised because churches have fewer reporting requirements than other non-profit organisations, and because it would effectively make political contributions tax deductible. So you can imagine these big super churches out there, they can get a nice lump sum from these people that want promoting, and it's tax free. They can go straight into their coffers tax free, and then they can preach politics because of the backing that they're getting. It's sort of an underhand way of doing it. Now, they're entitled to say what they want, you know. Supposedly they live in a free country, but when you're taking money like that and not paying tax on it, this was why President Lyndon B. Johnson put this in place. Well, actually did it when he was governor in 1950s, I believe.
1953.
Yeah.
He said.
So so anyway, Trump has already said that he's going to remove that. So you can see how much he cares about the Constitution and the separation of politics with religion. This church and state, he doesn't care for that. He cares more for people having the freedom to express their opinions, but really he doesn't realise what he's attacking. And Sister White's going to explain this point here in a quote from Review and Herald, December 24th, 1889, Art B, paragraph 1. And this is the very time period of the 1888 message after it had gone forth, and the time period of this this whole movement through the Johnson Amendment, not the Johnson Amendment, the Blair Bill, as it had come forward. She begins, she says, "Dear brethren and sisters, I have been much burdened in regard to movements that are now in progress for the enforcement of Sunday observance. It has been shown to me that Satan has been working earnestly to carry out his designs, to restrict religious liberty. Plans of serious import to the people of God are advancing in an underhand manner among the clergymen of various denominations, and the object of this secret manoeuvring is to win popular favour for the enforcement of Sunday sacredness. If the people can be led to favour a Sunday law, then the clergy intend to exert their united influence to obtain a religious amendment to the Constitution and compel the nation to keep Sunday." Now, this is obviously talking about our time period right here. Now, the symbol of Manasseh is a very important symbol. It teaches us that whatever's happening in the United States on the political level, externally, is happening in the church internally. So if that's happening externally, then in this movement there are underhand methods going on by certain clergy to impose a restriction on religious freedom. That's what it's teaching. That's what prophecy teaches. Whatever's happening in the land is happening in the church, right? So we have to be careful that we do not allow this spirit to we have to notice it. If there is a restriction on your religious liberty, your freedom to express your thoughts and understanding as Christ has led you to do it, then we should rise up and speak against that. This is the whole purpose why the United States was set up in the first place. She goes on to say there are many who, if they understood the spirit and the result of religious legislation, would not do anything to forward in the least the movement for Sunday enforcement. But while Satan has been making a success of his plans, the people of God have failed at their post. God had an earnest work for them to do, for the honour of his law and the religious liberty of the people are at stake. God would have us see and realise the weakness and depravity of men and put our entire trust in him. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armour of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. And that evil day is coming right here. We must be aware of these issues, we must recognise them, and we must speak out against them. Next quote from 5 Testimonies 7:1:1. A great crisis awaits the people of God. A crisis awaits the world. So, judgment begins at the house of God. The crisis comes to God's people first, then followed by the world. The most momentous struggle of all the ages is just before us. Events which for more than 40 years, notice she marks in 40 years right here, events which for more than 40 years we have, upon the authority of the prophetic word, declared to be impending are now taking place before our eyes. We put the 40 in here, so at the end of the 40 the events come to pass, right? So it's very nice that she's marking there 40 years and these events are now coming to pass. Already the question of an amendment to the Constitution restricting liberty of conscience has been urged upon the legislators of the nations. The question of enforcing Sunday observance has become one of national interest and importance. We well know what the result of this movement will be, but are we ready for the issue? Have we faithfully discharged the duty which God has committed to us of giving the people warning of the danger before them? And the people that we are to be warning are God's people right at this time, because judgment begins at the house of God. We are the people that's going to be judged first. There are many, even of those engaged in this movement for Sunday enforcement, who are blinded to the results which will follow this action. They do not see that they are striking directly against religious liberty. There are many who have never understood the claims of the Bible Sabbath and the false foundation upon which the Sunday institution rests. Any movement in favour of religious legislation is really an act of concession to the papacy, which for so many ages has steadily warred against liberty of conscience. Sunday observance owes its existence as a so-called Christian institution to the mystery of iniquity, and its enforcement will be a virtual recognition of the principles which are the very cornerstone of Romanism. When our nation shall so abjure the principles of its government as to enact a Sunday law, Protestantism will in this act join hands with Popery. It will be nothing else than giving life to the tyranny which has long been eagerly watching its opportunity to spring again into active despotism. So, Cestius teaches us that they want to put that in right here, but it doesn't happen. It comes forth, it looks like it's going to happen, but it doesn't. Cestius hastes away, but we know the first one of several Sunday laws goes in place right here at the midnight cry. But it's important to understand how that comes to play through Cestius and Titus, through this understanding of this war between the king of the north and the king of the south. Because this is where really the king of the north gets the mastery and the ascendancy. Right here, where the long drawn out war is going to come to an end. Next quote, 5 Testimonies 7:53. Now, we spoke about this quote before. It says, "We are standing on the threshold of great and solemn events." And we mark this right here, because in another quote where she uses this, she says, "Nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom." Speaking about Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13. We're standing on the threshold of great and solemn events. Prophecy is fast fulfilling. The Lord is at the door. There is soon to open before us a period of overwhelming interest to all living. The controversies of the past are to be revived. New controversies will arise. The scenes to be enacted in our world are not yet even dreamed of. Satan is at work through human agencies. Those who are making an effort to change the Constitution and secure a law enforcing Sunday observance little realise what will be the result. A crisis is just upon us. They little realise that when they bring that forth and put it here, the country is going to bring about a civil war. And when you read about 1848, it begins here and it's going to spread around the world. And we read that quote in the last presentation, and it's going to be nothing like we've ever seen. The world's going to get turned upside down on its head here. You have Satan coming down doing a work of deception. You've got the king of the south rising up here, this internal war going on in the United States. You've got this image of the beast that's coming forward here and testing God's people. You've got Satan coming down as an angel of light, trying to deceive those people. And then you've got this other group going in the cities and doing a wonderful work. And I believe that they're going to add so much confusion to this, what's already going on here, by their false prophesying. It truly is something, as what did she say there? She used she says, the scenes to be enacted in our world are not yet even dreamed of. So we can sort of understand there really what's going to take place, but the reality of it is going to be something completely beyond our capability of understanding. So, Daniel 11:40, right, is marking the retaliation of the king of the south, atheistic France, this atheistic, communistic element in the United States, this ideology that's going to rise up against this union between the president and the pope, right here. They're not going to be happy with it. It's going to cause a civil war. These two ideologies are fighting for the mastery. But it goes on to say in Daniel 11:40, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, with horsemen, with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, right, and shall overflow and pass over. And those countries at the end of the world is the United States. It's a conglomerate of countries. And shall overflow and pass over. So how does that look? Well, there's many places in prophecy. We just read that in Isaiah 19, that they're going to be given over to a fierce king. And you've got the story between Cestes and Titus. Titus comes back, right? Christ said it was going to happen, and the Jews, instead of believing the prophecy, what did they do? They ended up going out and attacking the Roman armies, trying to take them on. It's a symbol of public evangelism. This will be this group, this people that don't receive the truth right here, who go into the cities and do a wonderful work. They will be bringing down the judgments of God upon the cities, as if they, like the Jews, going out and attacking Rome, and it's going to come back and backfire upon their heads for giving false prophecy. Now, you can see this in this story if you go to Jeremiah 37 and verse 1, and it begins here with Zedekiah. This is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, which is related by Cestes and Titus. It says in verse 1, and King Zedekiah the son of Josiah reigned instead of Coniah the son of Jehoiakim, whom Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon made king in the land of Judah. So Now you've got Zedekiah. We put Zedekiah here, Kim Chin, Zedekiah under Jeremiah. This is the end of the 40 years. So it's marking right here at midnight, this story. In verse 2 it says, "But neither he nor his servants nor the people of the land did hearken unto the words of the Lord, which he spake by the prophet Jeremiah." So they don't believe what's about to happen. "And Zedekiah the king sent Jehukal the son of Shelemiah and Zephaniah the son of Maaseiah the priest to the prophet Jeremiah, saying, Pray now unto the Lord our God for us. Now Jeremiah came in and went out among the people, for they had not put him into prison. Then Pharaoh's army was come forth out of Egypt. And when the Chaldeans that besieged Jerusalem heard tidings of them, they departed from Jerusalem." So you see, there's a siege taking place upon Jerusalem. And all of a sudden, these tidings come that Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, the king of the south, is come up against them, right? And they depart from Jerusalem. So Cestius, what he's intended to do right here, he can't fulfill, right? Because of this king of the south, because of this army of Egypt that's come up. Then came the word of the Lord unto the prophet Jeremiah, saying, Thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, Thus shall ye say to the king of Judah, that sent you unto me to inquire of me, Behold, Pharaoh's army, which is come forth to help you, shall return to Egypt into their own land. And the Chaldeans shall come again and fight against this city, and take it and burn it with fire. Thus saith the Lord, Deceive not yourselves, saying, The Chaldeans shall surely depart from us, for they shall not depart. For though ye had smitten the whole army of the Chaldeans that fight against you, and there remain but wounded men among them, yet should they rise up every man in his tent and burn this city with fire. Here is the sure word of prophecy. Even though right here, when Cestius comes forth, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. But the sure word of prophecy is saying, even though the south inflicts the deadly wound right here, the sure word of prophecy is saying that this king of the north is going to come back and he's going to burn this city with fire. And it begins right here with the priests and concludes right here with the Levites. Okay, so it's stating something that's very important. It says, Deceive not yourselves, saying, The Chaldeans will surely depart from us. This is part of this false prophecy that's going to be given here. They won't believe that this is really what's taking place right here, and they're going to give a false message, a false hope, a peace and safety message. But we know that when they cry peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them. And it goes on, and you can see the structure of the binding off in here in verse 11. And it came to pass that when the army of the Chaldeans was broken up from Jerusalem for fear of Pharaoh's army, that's them hasting away. Okay, and the hasting away, you have to bring in line upon line. It's not just because of this what's taken place. You can show that it's also because God's people are here given a warning message. So there's other aspects that's causing this hasting away right here. Cestius is the king of the north, hastes away. The king of the south also hastes away, because when you look at the quote from the 21st of February 1848, it lasts for 3 months, and all of a sudden it was like a calm happened all at once, and it all stopped. It said it was unexplainable. And this is the Lord that's controlling these movements, and He's shown us what's going to come to pass. So in verse 12, Then Jeremiah went forth out of Jerusalem to go to the land of Benjamin, to separate himself thence in the midst of the people. So Jeremiah, when they haste away, it's marking a separation, and he comes up in verse 13, And when he was in the gate of Benjamin, a captain of the ward was there, whose name was Arijah, the son of Shelemiah, the son of Hananiah, and he took Jeremiah the prophet, saying, Thou fallest away to the Chaldeans. So he's accusing Jeremiah right there. He's at the gate. Gate marks judgment, the third step right here. He's accusing Jeremiah of going to side with the Chaldeans. Jeremiah goes, no, that's not true. That would be punishable by death. That's like treason almost. So he's accusing him of treason, which we know is a subject of Bible prophecy. And verse 14 he says, Then said Jeremiah, it is false. I fall not away to the Chaldeans, but he hearkened not to him. So Ahijah took Jeremiah and brought him into the princes. So he now gets brought before the princes. We know this is where God's people stand, and they're given a message to proclaim to them. Wherefore the princes were wroth with Jeremiah, and smote him, and put him in prison in the house of Jonathan the scribe, for they had made that the prison. When Jeremiah was entered into the dungeon and into the cabins, and Jeremiah had remained there many days, then Zedekiah the king sent and took him out, and the king asked him secretly in his house, and said, Is there any word from the Lord? And Jeremiah said, There is. For, said he, Thou shalt be delivered into the hand of the king of Babylon. So, the message that's proclaimed right here is that you're going to get delivered into the hand of the king of Babylon, referring to the Sunday law that's going to come. And the message, that's the message of the north, but the message of the east is that when you receive the mark of the beast, or because you've received the mark of the beast, referring to some people right here, the foolish priests, you're going to get punished by this east wind. Okay, symbolizing the 7 last plagues, which is the punishment for those that receive the mark of the beast. So, another point to prove that King of the North, King of the South, both United States of America, is in Genesis 41, we're just going to read a few verses from this and bring this thought again. Genesis 41, verse 1. It says, And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. So, this is, Pharaoh's asleep, and he has this dream, and we are familiar with this. And in verse 8 it says, And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for the magicians of Egypt. So this is Isaiah 19, right? He's troubled now by what's been taking place right here, and he's now inquiring from the magicians. This is Pharaoh. This is the king of the south, right? And this represents the United States, and it parallels with the story of Nebuchadnezzar. They both represent the United States, because when you go to Daniel chapter 2, so it says in Jeremiah 41:8 that he has this dream and his spirit is troubled. And when you go to Daniel chapter 2 and verses 1 and 2, And in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians, the astrologers, and the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. Again, same story. So you can see how they both represent the United States. There's this element that represents Pharaoh, and there's this element that represents Nebuchadnezzar, but they're both the same country. And we showed this by the tree. The tree that rises was Babylon. The tree that rises was Assyria. And Pharaoh was likened unto this tree of Assyria. It's these two elements that are within the United States. And there is a war going on within the United States for the supremacy. Right? Either one ideology or the other. And whatever one, they both want to conquer the world. Right? But it's shown us that it's the North that's going to conquer. It's the North that's going to gain the mastery. So, when I first came to understand this, I was thinking about my own country. In the United Kingdom, they have two main parties, Conservative and Labour. And one is to the left and one is to the right. And you see this very same thing in America, this Republican and
Democrats.
The Democrats. They're, you know, these two different ideologies of how to do things. But I think that this is what this is teaching us. So one of the the other rules that we know very well is Isaiah 46, verses 9 and 10. And it says, remember the former things of old. Now when God says remember, he says it for a purpose. We must remember the things of old, because they are what's going to teach us what's coming. For I am God, there is none else. I am God, there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning. And from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. So he declares the end from the beginning. So the point I want to make here, let me just find a place to, maybe I can do it here. So I draw a line here. People can correct me, I normally get this mixed up. Now this is the line of the 2520, and it begins with begins with the year 742. This is when the prophecy is given by Isaiah. This is marking the beginning of the prophecy, and there's like 19 years go past until the prophecy is fulfilled in 723, and prophecy is completed by 677 when the rest of God's people are taken captive just before they come and conquer Judah. So you've got this 46 here, and this is like this chiasm that takes you to the end of the 2520, at least the first 2520 in 1798. Gives you this 46 years to 1844, and then you've got this 19-year period again, takes you to 1863. So God demonstrates the end by the beginning. And in the beginning, you've got a war between the north and the south, and at the end, you've got a war between the north and the south. This was something that was put in place many years ago. And we always wonder why these things are there, but there's a great purpose for these things. So we're going to show now, and using these principles and bring them how this period and this period are both marking midnight right here. So in Isaiah chapter 7, now I don't profess to fully understand all the characters that are being played out in Isaiah 7. We're studying it and trying to ascertain every angle that's going on there and trying to bring it in line with the other things we understand. But we do know that there is a war between the northern Israel, the northern tribes, and the southern tribes. So you have this principle. And when we go to verse 11, it says, ask thee a sign of the Lord thy God, ask it either in the depth or in the height above. But Ahaz says, I will not ask, neither will I tempt the Lord. And he said, hear ye now, O house of David, is it a small thing for you to weary men, but will ye weary my soul, will ye weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. So the sign is the birth. And the birth is lining up with Cyrus, time of the end, which is lining up with midnight. This is the perfect fulfillment of Isaiah 14. This is the sign right here, the birth. This is the belly of the whale, the sign where God's people are going to come to the birth. And he's offering to give them a sign, but they don't want the sign. They don't want it. He's saying that they're wearying God because they're not interested in this sign right here. Okay? So this internal war between the north and the south in the glorious land is being brought to play right at this point right here, based upon this sign of the birth of Christ, represented by his people and the priests right here. Now, when we go down to the end of this chiasm right here, this chiastic structure, it takes us to 1863. Now we're going to read a quote now from General Conference Bulletin, page 100. It's got some other. It's some other. I didn't write it all out. The quotes are in the notes anyway, so you can have a look at that. But it's written by here, I think, Jane Loughborough. It so happens that on this campground there are 2 anniversaries. I have told you about one, the dark day of May 19, 1780. Now I want to tell you about the birth of a little child. So it's funny that we're talking about a birth right here, a birth of a child, marking here, and Jane Loughborough's marking the birth of a child, and we're going to see what that is referring to. Now I want to tell you about the birth of a little child. You know, old folks are all interested in little children. This was one that was born 50 years ago this very day, on May the 21st, 1863. May the 21st, 1863 puts us right at midnight. And I think it was about this hour that we got it where we could call it a living child. It was the General Conference. Do you think I am interested in hearing these reports? Well, I can hardly hold my breath sometimes when I hear them, how that little child has grown. So it's marking the point where they go from being a movement to being an organised structure. There's an organisation set up right here. And it's interesting how he marks it as a birth. I thought that was quite interesting, especially as the sign given by Isaiah is a birth. So you have this, God demonstrated the end from the beginning. It's taking this and sticking them right here at midnight, showing there is a war going on between the north and the south in the glorious land. 2 witnesses. You've got several witnesses right now. When you just bring those principles together, even though I don't proclaim to fully understand it, the principles are solid, and it's teaching us that Daniel 11:40 is fulfilled by what's going on in the glorious land at the end of the world. The United States is the subject of Bible prophecy. It's the 6th kingdom. Next quote from that's okay. I don't know. It's from the Pioneer Writings. It's I have to remember to write these things out, but it's in the notes, so you can read it. It says, in May 1863, representatives of the Sabbath-keeping Adventists were sent to Battle Creek for the first General Conference session. 20 delegates came representing 6 conferences. An executive committee of 3 was named. Elder John Byington, on May 21st, was chosen the first president of the General Conference. Now, for many years in this movement, we taught that when they picked a conference president, they were in fact rejecting God. So this takes us to 1 Samuel chapter 8. So it's showing us that Manasseh, it's showing us that Daniel 11:40 is talking about the movements that's going on within the glorious land, but it's also showing you similar movements going on in the church. Okay, the church and the land, they go hand in hand. They are being judged simultaneously at the same time. Okay, and remember the quote that we read from Education, page 175. It was teaching us that the God's dealing, He deals with individuals and nations in the same way. It all depends on the fidelity by which we carry out His purposes by walking after His principles.
Advent Pioneers Biographical Sketches and Pictures was the quote.
Advent Pioneers Biographical
Sketches
and Pictures, right?
Joseph Bates.
Page 8. Thank you very much. So, go to 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 1. It says, and it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judges over Israel. Now the name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second Abiah. They were judges in Beersheba. And his sons walked not in his ways, but turned aside after lucre. And they took bribes and perverted judgment. Then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together and came to Samuel unto Ramah, and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. So we understand this same spirit that's been manifested right here at midnight when they want to, the United States wants to pick, make this alliance with the Pope and put this cruel tyrant, this fierce king over the top of them. At the same time, the church, this movement is going from a movement right here to forming a new organization right here. Much we could speak about this organization that's going to be formed here. But it says that they're going to pick a leader. And I know that at this time period, in 1863, there was this debate because the Civil War is going on and they don't want to be drafted. Now, I don't know all the implications behind that, but I'm going to look into that more and try and understand what sort of that has to do with us right here. I've been reading it and I can't fully ascertain it right yet, how that affects us right here. But it may be that there is a draft right here, and that's what caused them to turn this movement into a formal organization with a formal leader in place. But I'm not saying that is the case. It's just that in 1863 that was one of the reasons I believe, but I've yet to really establish that. But anyway, they're going to do it, right? But what does God say about it? Verse 6. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. According to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even unto this day, wherewith they have forsaken me and served other gods, so do they also unto thee. Now therefore hearken unto their voice, howbeit yet protest solemnly unto them, and show them the manner of the thing that shall reign over them. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that asked of him a king. And he said, This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over thousands, and captains over fifties, and will set them to ear his ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war, and instruments of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectionaries, and to be cooks, and to be bakers. And he will take your fields, and your vineyards, and your oliveyards, even the best of them, and will give them to his servants. And he will take the tenth of your seed and of your vineyards, and give to his officers and to his servants. And he will take of your men servants and your maid servants, and your goodliest young men and your asses, and put them to his work. He will take the tenth of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. And ye shall cry out in that day because of your king, which ye have chosen you, and the Lord will not hear you in that day. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, Nay, but we will have a king over us, that we may also be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us, and go out before us, and fight our battles. So, much going to happen here at midnight. Daniel 11:40 is going to be fulfilled. And it's all based upon what's taking place in this time period, this tormenting by Islam. Okay, we read in our last presentation that the decree of Justinian was because of the Vandals, and the Vandals is the trumpet power that was causing them so much trouble right here. that he goes and makes the Pope the corrector of heretics, right? And they're trying to lift up this head right here. And the King of the South, this different ideology that's got a completely different way of trying to do things, is not going to be happy and is going to rise up and cause a civil war, right? And we see this by 21st February 1848. But God's word will come to pass. It's going to look like it's impossible for the Pope to come to pass after this. He's going to receive a deadly wound. But prophecy will be fulfilled. So all the scoffers are going to come forth in their droves and mock God's people for proclaiming the truth that they're going to do right here. And when that first Sunday law gets put in place right here, they'll already see the first signs of that. And when he does that, the east wind strikes. Now they can see the reality of what God's people are proclaiming right here. And it's going to be repeated right here. But now they're being tested on it. Okay, now they have no cloak for their sin. And the same things are going to be happening in the midnight cry with the Levites and the priests. You have both groups now. Levites going through their binding off, and they will stand here and give this final warning message to the world. And when they do not heed that, and the east wind strikes right here, you know that these things are going to increase. The mass slaughter is going to take place in this time period. This is the binding off for the 11th hour workers who have they're being tested right here on what they receive, and they enter into their third step. This is just a rundown. It's a beautiful rundown of what's going to happen in end time events. And there's much that we have to understand. Many, many layers of truth we have to lay upon here, line upon line. But the Lord has given us these wonderful principles, this wonderful binding off structure, and all these wonderful truths and how they just fit right in there. And I don't profess that everything is here is 100%, but you can see the logic, you can see how it all marries up together, teaches you one complete line of truth. And there's much more I want to understand about this. Many stories that we're looking at in Daniel 11, and you can see how it's all based upon this marriage that takes place right here that was typified in 1989. It's all based upon this false marriage. And it's right before us. It says we're standing on the threshold of great and solemn events. So I appeal to my brothers and sisters to study, to show yourselves approved, to get into God's word, to prove all things and hold fast that which is good, and to ensure that our feet are standing on a platform of truth, and that we are not putting our trust in the arm of the flesh, right? Because it will not stand when we come to that time. Shall we close with a word of prayer? Dear Heavenly Father, these truly are great and solemn events, and without your word we would be blind. We would have no knowledge of these things. We would be doing the same as what the world was doing, involved in all the foolishness that we were involved in before. But we want to praise you, Lord, and thank you for taking us away from that, for impressing upon us the solemn convictions of your approaching footsteps, and how we're going to have to stand before you at some point and give an account of our life and the things that we've done, whether they've been to glorify you or whether they've been for our own selfish interests. Please help us, Lord. Please change our hearts. We can do nothing of ourselves, but we can do all things through Christ which strengthens us. Please grant us that grace that you've promised, and you've promised to do more for your people now than ever before. So please help us to have open hearts. Please help us to confess our sin, to seek meekness, that we might be hid in the day of the Lord's anger, to have distrust of self, to never trust any human being with our salvation, to put our complete trust in Christ and the way that he's led us by looking back to how he led us in the past. Help us, Lord, to keep our feet on those foundational truths that you've given us and how you led us, and Please allow the truth to be unfolded before us as we take trust in those things that you've shown us. And we thank you, Lord, and trust that you will lead us all the way. And we ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.